You know, I'm no historian, but I do love history. In fact, I'm attending school to become a history teacher. But do you know what else I love? Video game lore. So why don't we go on a journey together? A journey about man, myth, and legends, while we explore the beautiful world of Skyrim. I'm Brandon, the lore historian, and I hope you enjoy the journeys we're about to embark on. In this series, we will explore vast, story and lore-rich worlds of games such as Skyrim, Oblivion, Ghost of Tsushima, and Red Dead Redemption 2, with our goal being to uncover the myths, legend, and ancient beliefs throughout history that have inspired them. We will begin with a god among men, a warrior, a conqueror, some would say a crusader, the Ninth Divine himself, who was once, and maybe always, just a man. In the universe of the Elder Scrolls, Talos, otherwise known when mortal as Tiber Septim, but possibly first as Hjalti Earlybeard, is known to have united Tamriel, a feat many to this day still believe impossible, and another even more questionable feat, ascension to godhood. The legendary Talos is embroiled in a history of war, religious, and ideological upheaval. Even with his death, his story had only just begun. In this episode, we will explore his tale, his rise from mortal to myth, and compare it to the world's most iconic cases of deification, the Mesopotamians and the ancient Egyptian pharaohs. These men lived as rulers, emperors, and kings, and were buried to ascend to godhood, and believed to live forever among the stars. Talos' life was shrouded in mystery from the very beginning. Was he a god among men, or was he made into a god by man due to power, politics, and propaganda? For many, Talos was actually born Talos of Atmora, as he was destined by the gods themselves. It is in Skyrim where his ascension would begin, and this is where, as a young warrior, he would develop in the ancient art of the tugs. Again, sorry about the child. By 20, he had learned the art of war, and he had led his troops to victory in the battle of the... Is it Old Horladan? Horladan? You guys would know. Horladan. And that was the first of many accomplishments that would lead him to eventually becoming Tiber Septim and the first emperor of a united Tamriel. This, of course, is the Imperial official history. There is a darker history, a darker written history, in the Arcturian hearsay. And this, the Imperial history, is actually the myth of Talos. And it is actually quite possible that the real man is Hjalti Earlybeard, who was a Breton that was born on the islands of High Rock. In this case, he was just a mere mortal that proved himself through sheer willpower to be in the service of King Khulakane. This tale hints at Hjalti being the true Dragonborn, but not without the assistance of the fallen king Yasmir, who was turned to ash when he ascended High Hrothgar, believing himself to be the one to unite Tamriel. As the two conquered, they grew more powerful, and then came betrayal. Khulakane was assassinated. Hjalti nearly was too, his throat allegedly cut in the attempt, which would forever damage his voice. Some say he survived the attempt, others suggest something darker, that he and Yasmir orchestrated the assassination, clearing the way for Hjalti to ascend the throne and be crowned Tiber Septim. So, was Talos always destined for godhood? Was he just a conqueror who wanted the power so he could play a god? Perhaps he was both. Could it be that Tiber Septim, Talos, and Hjalti were all one man? Were they even the same person at all? Is it possible that the story echoes throughout our own world history? To find out, let's delve into human history and take a look at the ancient civilization of Mesopotamia, to the very first man to be known as a deity, Naram-sin of Akkad, or Akkad. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that yet. Much like Talos, Naram-sin's origins are unclear. Some records show him as the rightful heir of Sargon the Great, others suggest something darker. But what is known as this? Naram-sin did something no Mesopotamian ruler had ever dared to do before. There are no actual birth records for Naram-sin, so his origins are a little bit, as I said earlier, a little bit mysterious, just like Talos. And I was wrong, he's not actually the heir of Sargon the Great, and it's actually a debate if Sargon the Great even actually existed. He is supposedly the grandson of Sargon the Great. However, we'll learn later why it's a little bit debated if Sargon the Great was even actually a real person. It looks like he is actually the son of Manishitusu, I don't know, Manishtusu. That would be his father, who ruled for 15 years before Naram-sin did. But again, it's kind of, the story kind of blends fact and a little bit of historical fiction that was written about Naram-sin. It gets into about the Agadi curse or Gade curse, about how they basically brought a curse upon his empire after he died because he believed he was a god himself. So that's his origin is debated because we don't really know if Sargon the Great even actually existed, but he is supposedly the grandson of Sargon the Great, who is a legendary king in Akkadian history. You can already see the similarities between the two. Both of their origin stories are very unclear. Both of how they came to power is very unclear. Both of who they are is very unclear, and who they were. And it's also debated in a lot of areas if they were actually just one man, or if they were multiple men. So there's a lot of myth that goes into both stories. We're gonna go ahead and go back to Talos now. In the Imperial official history, Talos was born to E828, which is not a debate in the hearsay either. In the Imperial official history, he was born on Atmora, which would make him of Nordic descent. The name Talos in the ancient tongue of Elnifi, you guys tell me how that's said, actually means Storm Crown, which is a pretty fucking cool name. Now, some stories of his birth say that he was blessed from the gods right from the beginning, which is why he was given the name Talos. Other accounts, even in the Imperial official history, will say that he was raised in Skyrim. He was raised among Nords, and that's how he became such a fierce warrior, from training with the Nords in Skyrim. And even as a child in Skyrim, Talos was considered different. He was very talented in battle. He was a very talented warrior. He also had the ability to use the voice, or the Thu'um, which is an ancient Nordic power of the dragon shouts. Talos, being destined as he was called to High Hrothgar by the Greybeards. As nearby cities and villages were evacuating, he decided to climb the mountain. When he arrived, the Greybeards called his name. He did not turn to ash. He did not cower. He listened. The Greybeards told him that he would be the ruler of Tamriel. He needed to go south to do so first. From the Greybeards, he learned the secrets of the high peak winds, the roar of the winter blast, and the warm silk of the summer updrafts. It is said that as he ascended down the mountains, not ascended, as he descended down the mountains, he came riding clouds, and he was wearing a pair of great boots that were the gifts of the Greybeards. And being such a great young warrior, by the time that he was 20, Talos was actually the general of King Culhuacain's army. This is where his legend would truly begin, as in the Battle of Old Roladan. I think it's Roladan. I think I did better than the first time I tried that. He would actually use the voice for the first time to crush the enemy, furthering his legend. After the Battle of Old Roladan, Talos decided to retake Sacred Tor, which is a holy site that was believed to be lost to the Imperials. Not only did he succeed in this, he recovered the Amulet of Kings, which is an artifact that is tied to the Dragonborn Emperors of Cyrodiil. When Talos was around 26 or 27, King Culhuacain was actually assassinated. These assassins were likely Bretons from Hyrule. Now, in the assassination attempt, Talos actually almost died himself. His throat was actually slit, which meant that he could no longer use the Thu'um or his voice anymore. He was still very powerful, he still had a lot of myth, he could just no longer use the shouts. However, since Culhuacain was now assassinated, and again, this is where the mystery kind of deepens a little bit here. There was only one person who could be the emperor who was given that kind of myth or push or propaganda, and that would be Talos himself. He would take the throne, and he would name himself Tiber Septim. What did Talos or Tiber Septim want to do as emperor? Well, he wanted to unite all of Tamriel. He wanted to unite all of Tamriel. He would launch a campaign that would end up being known as the Tiber Wars. This was a brutal, sweeping conquest, and it was filled with military campaigns, political deals, and a lot of mystery. Now, remember, this is the Imperial official history. So all that mystery, all that bloodshed, all the conquesting that goes into these wars is a little bit glossed over. So in the Imperial official history, how did he conquer Hammerfell? Well, he brought Hammerfell into the mix through a mix of warfare and strategy. What about the great Morrowind? Well, of course, Morrowind they joined the Empire without any war. Now, the reason they joined the Empire is because of the threat of the ancient brass god Dwemer that Tiber had he had control of at this time, I guess. The Numidium, right? So he had control of that before he went into Morrowind, and there was no conflict. They just signed a treaty, and that's all that happened. The Black Marsh, Tiber wanted nothing to do with the Black Marsh. And Elsewhere? What is Elsewhere? And there are many more battles not gone over in the Imperial official history, which is absolutely insane because the Tiber War went on for 42 years. It went on for... He just fucked shit up. Anyways, that's the Imperial official history of the Tiber War. The Aldmeri Dominion was defeated, and how Tamriel had became united, making it the Third Empire. Now this would also begin the new Golden Age, where human ambition was now elevated to divine right. After 81 years of ruling a united Tamriel, Tiber Septim would die in 3E38 at the age of 108 years old. From this point on, the Empire declared Tiber Septim as a god, Talos, who was the ninth divine. He was no longer just remembered, he was worshipped. His cult became official and sanctioned. His cult and worship became official and sanctioned among the Empire. His statues went up all over Tamriel, and his temples were filled with prayers of soldiers, farmers, and kings just alike. To the Nords, he was the ultimate warrior king. To the Imperials, he was the god who held the Empire together. For a long time, there was no real change. However, in the Fourth Era, after the devastating Great War between the Empire and the Altmeri Dominion, the Empire signed the White Gold Concordat in 4E175. This was a peace treaty with a catch. One of the terms, the worship of Talos had to be banned. The Thalmor, the elven rulers of the Dominion, viewed Talos' deification as hearsay to the divine order. This ban sent shockwaves through the Empire. Many Nords saw This ban sent shockwaves through the Empire. Many Nords saw it as an unforgivable betrayal, not just for faith, but for identity. The outrage helped spark the Stormcloak Rebellion in Skyrim, a conflict that redefined Talos from the unifying figure into the symbol of resistance. His statues would be torn down in the Imperial capital, but the worships continued in secret, and sometimes open in defiance across the Nord homeland. So again we ask, who was Talos? Was he a man? Was he a myth? Was he a god? Was he all three? Was he perhaps more than just one man? His official story paints him as the destined hero of men, a divine conqueror who brought order to a chaotic world. But even within the Empire, shadows linger, and other accounts, like the Arcturian hearsay, suggest that the real story might be something much more complicated and dark. For this part of the story, I mainly want to credit two people, Double Negative on YouTube, whose YouTube channel I'll link in the description, and Jinja Ninja from Reddit, who made a comment 12 years ago on a post that gave me some of the best information about the Arcturian hearsay that I could possibly find on the internet. I just wanted to give those two a shout out. Now, according to hearsay, Hjalti Earlybeard was born on 2E828, although he was born on High Rock in this story. Hjalti is still raised in Skyrim in this story, and he's still raised by Nords, and he still becomes a warrior. However, in this one, he is proclaimed the Dragonborn by the Greybeards. This, of course, gets the attention of Yasmir, who thought he was the Dragonborn. Once he realizes that he can use Hjalti to accomplish his ultimate goal of wiping out the elves, that's his whole thing, is he wants to use his power to wipe out the elves. He connects with Hjalti, and he teaches him to further his power in the shouts. Around this time in Skyrim, a warlord this time, Kulakane, is in the middle of a campaign. Hjalti realizes that he's in the middle of campaign and joins forces with him. It is during these battles when Hjalti and Yasmir become renowned. This is when they show off their shout, this is when they show off their battle prowess, this is when Hjalti's myth really becomes a living legend. Now, during battles, Yasmir would assist Hjalti not only with his shouts, but he would become a storm cloud of ash and defend Hjalti. Hjalti would actually be untouchable to his enemies. This is the reason that he was given the name Talos, which again means storm. and not soon after joining forces with Khulakain, he would become Khulakain's general. Now, this obviously led to notoriety and fame, and it would attract the attention of Khulakain's battle mage, Ziran Arctis. This is where the story starts to take a dark turn, with basically an unstoppable general who, at this point, may have been 3 men, not just 1, but 3. Khulakain's forces were able to take Cyrodiil. This would lead Khulakain down the path of being emperor. However, before Khulakain could actually start his reign, he was assassinated. And as I mentioned earlier, this was supposedly done by Breton assassins of the Nightblade. That's the official story. The more realistic story is that the 3, Yasmir, Talos, or Hjalti in this case, and Ziran, were actually the ones to assassinate Khulakain. Now, according to the hearsay, Talos was not the one to name himself Tiber Septim. That was actually Ziran who named him Tiber Septim. And now, with Tiber Septim as the face and the one sitting on the ruby throne, it was actually the 3 Yasmir, Ziran, and Tiber Septim who were the rulers. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Tiber Septim, Talos, early Hjalti Earlybeard was not one person. He was 3 people. Because Tiber Septim's throat was allegedly cut during this, it obviously showed that he was innocent, and it obviously gave him a reason to want to go on the campaign that would lead to the Tiber War. Now, at this point, Yasmir has taken physical. He is able to take the same form as Talos or Tiber Septim, or at least look similar or dress similar. Now, after the assassination, before the campaign starts, Yasmir actually is sent to Skyrim, to High Rock, to Hammerfell, and he's actually the one that is portraying the general in the East. So again, tying back to Tiber Septim is not one person, but in the eyes of everybody else, he's a mythical legend because he's able to be in multiple places at one time. After Yasmir was successful in his conquest, masquerading as Talos, or Tiber Septim, he set his eyes on Morrowind. The 3 wanted to take Morrowind, but mainly Yasmir wanted to take for himself. Tiber Septim wanted to kill Lorcan. That's pretty much it. But Yasmir wanted to eliminate the elves, and the elves at this point had control over Morrowind. The only problem is that even with the force of Tiber Septim and his battle mage and Yasmir, they couldn't overcome the Morrowind leadership. They couldn't overcome the Tribunal, which actually infuriated Yasmir, and he wanted to separate himself from Arctis and Septim. Now, Morrowind's leaders, I'm not 100% sure. The history's kind of murky here. It's hard to understand. You really don't even get details of what happened during the battle or anything. But basically, there was a man or a leader named Vivek. He had control over the Numidian. So this is where, again, Morrowind was scared, so they signed a treaty, blah, blah, blah. They actually had control of the Numidian at this point, right? So, to get the treaty signed, or the Amicus signed, to get everything set official, Vivek is going to give the Numidium. He actually gives it to Tiber Septim. Now, there's a reason Morrowind hasn't been able to use it, or the leaders of Morrowind haven't been able to use it. It needs souls. Okay, so I'm not going to get into the details of all the names. Basically, it needs a Shezarene? I'm not really sure. A Shezarene. However, nobody is going to sacrifice themselves for that, right? So Arctis comes up with a plan, and the plan is to trap Yasmir. They're going to use Yasmir's soul to power the Numidian. Tiber's like, hey Yasmir, come on back. Come back to Morrowind, come back to the Imperial City. Let's see what's up, let's figure this out, right? Obviously, Yasmir figures out something is up. Him and Arctis get in a fight. Now, Arctis is able to cast his soul-trapping spell, but at the same time, Yasmir is able to shout him into ash, just like Yasmir was by the Greybeards. They die at the same time. Their souls become intertwined. Arctis becomes the new Underking, while Yasmir is put into the Mentella, whatever the Mentella is, right? Which I think is probably like a soul gem. Now, Tiber Septim actually along the way is actually going to give part of his soul to the Numidium as well to power. When it is powered up, all three souls combined into one. The Numidium, being all three souls at one, is able to realize the myth of Talos and realize that it has been these three the whole time, portraying one man. The Numidium himself does not need this, though. He does not need this type of power. So, he injects it back into Talos. Talos becomes all three men at one time. The last thing for Talos to do is conquer Alinor, which he does and is granted absolute power. With this part of the story being true, Talos is no longer a myth. Talos is a god. Talos has ascended to godhood. Tiber Septim was now unstoppable, and he would use terror to control, eliminate, and limit the races that he hated. He particularly hated Bretons and would take many prisoners of war. He would enslave them or he would mass murder. He also hated orcs, goblins, and the Khajiit. He especially hated the Khajiit, and he would commit flenicide. Flenicide? Is that the word? Flenicide. He would not just eliminate the Khajiit. He would turn these into spectacles. He would eliminate them with the Numidian. He would capture them. He would torture them. He would execute them in masses. In the hearsay, Talos is a ruthless war criminal, a dictator who didn't just fight his enemies but erased them. He used the Numidian to obliterate populations, enslave cultures, and chop through tradition and belief. It is believed that the Numidian did not just mass murder people or eliminate them from existence, but also did not allow them to reach the afterlife. They would be cosmically erased from time and history. It is also believed that using the Numidian destroyed the fabric of reality and rewrote history itself, which may have also contributed to the myth of Talos, making him a god. And in this case, if he really did warp reality, if he really did set the fabric of time and rewrite history, maybe that does make him a god. For this section, I want to give a shout out to CY History on YouTube, and I'll link his YouTube in the description as well. Talos was not the only man who had ambitions of being a god. The real world has its own deified men as well, and the first to claim himself a god is the original god king himself, Naram-sin of Akkad. To find out about the god king himself, we have to go back 4,300 years into our own past and travel back to the ancient lands of Mesopotamia. As I mentioned earlier, Naram-sin is the grandson of the founder of the Great Akkadian Empire, Sargon the Great. Now, all the kings of the Akkadian Empire had to deal with upheavals and rebellions. And Naram-sin was no different. He would have to prove himself by striking down the revolts throughout the empire. During his time, this was known as the Great Revolt. That's because it involved many cities, and it involved 2 elected leaders, and being an elected leader back then wasn't a very common occurrence. The 2 rebel leaders, Kish of Kish and Imar-Jared, or Imar-Jared, of Uruk, or Uruk, were supposedly chosen by their own people, and Naram-sin saw this as a personal affront to the gods. That is because he believed kings were supposed to be divinely chosen by the gods, and because of this, he believed the 2 rulers and rebellions must be crushed. Bear with me as I have to read these city names. Kish had gained the support of Borsippa, Khazali, and Sapar, and this was seen as the greater threat to the empire than the rebellion led by Imar-Jared. And as stated in the book The Age of Agadi, by Benjamin F. Foster, before Naram-Sin's troops went into battle and went to the Battle of Kish, Naram-Sin first closed the gates of Agadi and made a passionate speech to the god of justice and treaties. It is speculated that during this speech, he told the god that Kish was unworthy to be a ruler because he was not chosen by the divines. He found this disrespectful, and that his empire had made the title King of Kish resound before the disrespectful Kishites had turned against the empire. Now, even with the backing of all those cities in the city of Kish, This was not much of a battle. Naram-Sin's army would cakewalk the Kishites and push them back into the city of Kish. And it is here where 2,500 Kishite soldiers would die. And much like Talos in one of his early battles, Naram-Sin would end up dismantling the wall surrounding Kish, and he did this because he wanted to redirect nearby rivers into the city of Kish. So he would actually completely flood the city of Kish, and in the meantime, he would take Kish captive. Amir Jared's rebellion wouldn't fare any better, even with the backing of cities such as Napar, Umma, Isin, Lagash, and is it Sturpak? You guys tell me how to pronounce that one. Sturpak. Now, before flooding the city of Uruk this time, Naram-Sin would actually take the city's treasure, and he would again take Amir Jared captive, officially crushing the rebellion. Around the same time as the rebellion, Naram-Sin led his most famous campaign against the Lulubi people of the Zagros Mountains. And in this campaign, this is where he's first depicted as a god. The victory stele, the victory stele of Naram-Sin is depicting this event. In this stele, Naram-Sin is pictured as double the size of his soldiers and the enemy soldier. With all these accomplishments, as great as the empire was that Sargon had established, Naram-Sin had expanded it greatly. This he would refer to as the four quarters of the world. This being Amuru, which was to the west by the Meridian Sea, Sarbattu, which is up north, Akkad, which he considered south, and Ebla, which he considered to the east. According to CY History on YouTube, this would be from modern-day cedar forest by the Mediterranean Sea to the kingdom of Mushashi, or modern-day Iran. With the expansion of his empire and the fact that he was able to lead 9 successful conquests in less than a year, it would lead him to believe that he himself were a god. Naram-Sin would proclaim himself the god of Agadi, and in many artifacts he would be depicted or described as the god of Agadi. In his time alive, he truly challenged divinity, and he would go on to deify himself, his father, and his grandfather. There is, however, mystery with this. Many people throughout history believe that Sargon was actually Naram-Sin, and that is why he deified Sargon as well. If you look at the depictions of Sargon, you'll see a lot of similarities to Naram-Sin. It is also said that Naram-Sin arrogance of believing himself to be a god set upon a curse of the rulers of the Akkadian Empire, though as I stated earlier, there is always rebellions when there is a new leader. Naram-Sin would die in 2218 BC after 37 years of ruling the Akkadian Empire, ruling for not even half the time of Talos, but leaving a legacy that would live on in the real world to this current day. Many men have deified themselves since the god of Agadi's deification, but only one could be the first. The king of the four quarters, the god king himself, Naram-Sin. In Talos and Naram-Sin, we see the echoes of empire and ambition. One in Tamriel, the other in Mesopotamia. Both altered history, some say time itself, in their pursuit of power. But this is a tale how godhood, in any world, comes with a price. If you made it this far, I want to thank you guys so much for watching my first video. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. If you have any critiques, please leave them in the comments. I want all the feedback I could possibly get on this. In the next section, or the next segment of this, we are going to be going over ancient Egypt and the pharaohs. We'll be going over the Book of the Dead, and little things like that as well. And hopefully we can get into the pyramids and compare them to some Talos shrines and artifacts. Anyways, guys, I want to thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video. See you at the next shrine.